It says, you know the commandments, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery.
Yeah.
And it says, all these I have kept from my youth, but he doesn't take into account the first and second commandment, you know.
Yeah.
He
Love your God, the Lord your God.
With all his heart, mind, soul, body,
Right.
and strength. If he did, he'd have no problem leaving everything and following Christ.
You are, Luke, again, you are actually agreeing with my proposition here. Because you see, the first cardinal law is?
Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind.
Is that what Jesus said?
He said, what's the most important commandment?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, it's to love your Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and body, strength.
Again, we come back to Christ himself is saying, love the Lord your God.
Yeah, Jesus was a preacher of the law of Moses. You know, he preached the law of Moses.
Absolutely.
Said,
now tell me, according to the logic that you have employed here, if there's a good Christian who is rich, does he go to paradise?
So what we would probably say here, I mean, I don't know what many Christians
I like the
say.
word probably.
Yeah, I mean, again,
it can't be explicit, I understand. Yeah.
It's not like every Christian agrees perfectly on every passage.
But the idea here is what we're stressing is that it's not some extra command that he's just unaware of, and if he does that one, great, then he really is perfect.
Yeah.
What we're saying is the man claims to be perfect. Jesus is trying to demonstrate that he's not, so he gives this particular man who's claiming to be perfect an example and showing you don't perfectly love God. For example, you actually love money more.
Yes.
For Christians who don't love money more, that command may not be necessarily imposed upon
Absolutely.
them. Although
Agreed.
you could say in a different sense that as Christians, all of our lives, everything we are money, our possessions, our life, our energy, our time, it all belongs to God. Now,
agreed.
To do that, to live a life with God, we have to have a certain amount of money to pay rent.
Absolutely, But you know what you just said is exactly the sentiments that I would hold. Yeah, you know why? Because if the person is good, if the person, right, I see, he's putting it so nobody walks through, you see, I would agree with the sentiments here. You know why? Because if a person is doing good and he happens to be rich, and he keeps to the commandments, he succeeds, doesn't he?
What do you mean he succeeds? As in he goes to...
Well, he will obtain paradise, won't he?
So what we're saying is, for this particular man, claims to keep the commandments, he doesn't. Jesus shows that because one of his issues is greed. Well, so in your scenario, a man, even if he was rich, but he was generous, wealth wasn't an issue with him, Jesus would have given him another example, saying, do this, and he wouldn't have done it. In every scenario, Jesus would have said, this is an issue where your heart is sinful.
Right, that is speculative, isn't it, though?
It's the same.
I'm speculating based on
now,
the wider context of the passage, which is he's trying to show the man is sinful.
Understood.
Only with God can there be salvation.
No. He's not showing that man is sinful. If I can just, what he is saying to him, he says, according to Matthew that you are referring to, I have done X, Y, and Z. What yet do I still lack? So Jesus says to him, he says, I tell you what, sell what you have, release everything, and come and follow me. Now tell me, were there disciples who were following him? Right there? Were there any rich disciples of Jesus?
Well, yes.
Yes? Would that verse apply to them?
We're saying no.
I agree with you, but now here's the issue.
If someone's already entered the kingdom of God, then it's impossible for their wealth to stop them from entering the kingdom of God. Do you see what I mean?
I agree.
It's only an issue in as so much as that reliance on wealth stops me from feeling my need of Christ and believing
I
in
agree.
Him. You see what I mean?
I agree. But no problem. But here is where the central crux of the approach I have. As I said to you, Genesis to Revelation, if I were to look at everybody as a mighty messenger of God, because logic is telling me that if you go to the army, and you are put through training, you will almost inevitably go to someone who knows what they are doing to be able to train you. It doesn't make sense that you will go to somebody who is going to try and train you who doesn't know what they are talking about. So you have got from Genesis to Revelation a stream of prophets all telling you one thing: love the Lord your God, the Lord yeah, with all your heart, with all your soul, with everything. Okay? Then you are told by Jesus himself, keep to the commandments. We have an issue about exactly what he meant. Yeah? But here is what I said earlier, and I will repeat. Would there be a problem if you were to accept Jesus Christ merely as a mighty messenger of God, and on that basis keep to good works and obtain salvation? Can that be done? Sorry?
No, we believe you have to believe the deity of Christ, yes.
The belief aspect, I'm just leaving for a side. I understand.
We believe, based upon evidence, that one needs to believe the deity of Christ.
You're getting at theoretically, if I was born and was perfect from the moment I was born to the moment I died and kept the law perfectly, then I would then be God, and then this, that's I wouldn't need servant.
Yeah, no, sorry, just a man.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
that was the case.
Yeah.
But so theoretically, it's possible to be saved by the law if you were perfect.
Yeah.
As God is perfect, which is impossible.
Yeah.
See
No,
what
I
mean?
agree. But just to sum up everything,
Yeah.
I look at it this way, and I'm going to ask you to consider this. The Creator is perfect,
Yes.
according to what we understand.
Yeah.
The Creator is perfect. The Creator creates. Is what He creates perfect?
It was perfect.
Does the Creator create what is perfect?
It was perfect. So,
I like that.
yeah, it
I think
was.
within a Christian
So it's-
perspective,
Yeah.
one could say what he created was very good. I mean, Genesis tells us that.
No,
Is it
no,
possible-
I'm not saying very good, perfect.
Let me finish.
Sorry, I do
So
apologize.
at the very least, Genesis tells us what God has created is, good, and then within that, there's mankind very good, etc. It is, I think, possible within a Christian worldview to say that God's plan, what God does in human history,
Yeah.
is perfect. That it will perfectly work out for His praise and glory.
Yes.
Even though within that He may create or allow for less than perfect elements, so that an ultimately perfect goal may be reached.
Yeah.
That's why, especially for those Christians who believe in predestination, I do not believe. I don't know about my brother Luke here.
Yeah, of course.
But we would say that God, and many Muslims perhaps, Karbon,
Yeah.
God can divinely ordain that which is less than perfect for a perfect end.
Yeah.
That's my answer to your question.
No. I can agree with you. You see, here is the logic.
Yeah.
Whatever the Creator creates is a created entity. Yeah. By definition, any association with the Creator of a created entity is a no-no. It can't happen, can it?
Say again, sorry.
By definition, anything that is a created entity cannot be associated on an equal footing with a Creator. By definition.
No, unless God creates something with which He will associate Himself.
Now, I'm so glad, because you see, the moment you say that, you are still acknowledging that it is a created entity.
Because humanity is
And it will never, humanity or otherwise, it can never be associated on level par with the Creator. Do you agree?
Well, that's kind of what I'm
think you're
trying to dispute. And I'm saying that God can associate with it,
Yes.
in the sense of becoming incarnated within that.
Right?
So I'm maybe disagreeing with you. Depends exactly
Yeah,
what you-
you may be disagreeing, but the disagreement has to be on the point of logic here. Yeah, are you suggesting to me that the Creator created another entity which was equally powerful?
No, it was not equally
No.
powerful.
So,
We're talking
what?
about Christ, but in a hidden way. We are.
Yeah, well, that's what we are talking about. I think
Meat on the table.
No. I wasn't talking
Yeah,
about it. He introduced it, so I can agree with
that's
him
where
though.
you're going with
I
it.
can, no,
That's the
honestly,
game of chess. You gotta understand.
I don't know how to twist the thing.
I wasn't.
peripheral.
Honestly, sincerely, Luke. Honestly, I wasn't. I was just following it through.
Yeah.
You know what? I was talking about the perfection creation, but he introduced it, and rightly so. Yeah.
Yeah.
You see, whatever is created, and this is a central issue I need us to consider. Was Jesus the Christ created?
So Jesus' humanity was created, His divinity was not. And you can say
Excellent.
that the
Richard.
you can say that the coming into being of Christ, the association of man and divinity,
Agreed.
of course that began at the point of time.
But I am going to make a pronouncement here about Richard. Yeah, watch this. Richard, the Creator created your humanity on earth for you. Prior to that, you were divine.
Run that by me again.
Right, I'll run it by you again. The humanity of Richard was created by the Creator on earth for him. Prior to that, he was also divine. Do you disagree?
Yes.
Why?
I disagree on two accounts.
Go on.
One, I was not pre-existently divine, so I dispute that statement.
How do you know that?
Because A, I have no evidence for it, and B, it was contrary.
And if I were to give you evidence for it,
If you give me evidence
scriptural evidence,
for it, I'd have to weigh it up against the rest of Scripture. I think the Scripture is strongly against you on that.
okay.
The other point is actually, this may be a peripheral issue, we'll
Yeah.
see.
Sure.
The idea of God creating an individual, I mean, I would say God is the creator, he creates the world. In what sense he creates individuals within that world is a discussion you would need to have.
Absolutely, I agree entirely. You see, the logic here is this one, mind. Yeah, and I want you to run this through in the mind for a few seconds. Was there a time when God had no thought of you?
I would say probably no.
Yeah, my instinct is to say no. I couldn't
There isn't,
pull up a scripture straight away to say.
there isn't a time where we were not in the mind of God.
Second, there wasn't.
There was
no,
not
I
a
would say
time.
probably no. But
Is
the
it-
reason being because he is omniscient.
Yeah.
We believe he's all-knowing.
Yeah.
We believe he, therefore, likely always knew the way that he was going to create the world, which would include our existence.
Likely always knew doesn't apply to the Creator, because then we are adding a historical element which the Creator is not privy to.
I found a
So
Are you
that
saying I'm
so
applying a
basically,
historical phrase?
well, you are applying a phrase which automatically by definition has limitedness to it. Now that can't apply to the
I
Creator.
found a scripture.
We can debate.
So
found
the
a scripture
Creator
which
is
suggests it.
go on.
Yeah, it says that Jesus Christ was the Lamb slain before the foundation of the world, and the way that Christians generally understand it is that's in the mind of God. He was always going to sacrifice His Son. Yeah. So
Now he's giving me scriptural evidence.
If sacrifice was needed, it was needed for someone. So therefore, it
Yeah,
must have been
sure.
on His mind at least before the foundation
Oh,
of the
we
world.
can
Yeah.
agree. Before creation, God knew what
Now-
was going to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah.
Before the creation, were you in the mind of God?
Yeah. Yes.
Now,
Immediately before, yes.
now I can. Now here is an issue. If we were all in the mind of God, and I said to you, Richard, you're sorry. Yeah, sure, brother. If you can pinch it. Yeah. Thank you. I have no idea. Yeah. Now, was I wrong in saying to you, Richard, that your flesh, yeah, your body was created for you here? Prior to that, what were you?
Prior to my flesh being created, what was I?
By the Creator. What were you?
Non-existent except for in the mind of God.
But if
Unless
you-
perhaps we say I had a soul pre-existing.
If you are,
that's
if you were in the mind of God, according to that logic, were you in the divine mind?
Yes. In the divine mind.
So logically,
Yes,
were you
God.
divine also?
No, because being in the divine mind is not being divine.
Right? Do you think Christ was the same?
Do I think he was only divine in the sense he was in the divine mind?
Well, he was in the mind, wasn't he, of the Creator? Because he was created by the Creator.
Well, first of all, you can say that God the Father is in the mind of God the Father because he's aware of his own existence. So
Can you
this
say that?
can apply to all men. Sorry?
Can you say that?
I don't see why not.
Okay.
God
Go
the
on.
Father knew that God the Father would always exist.
God the
Like,
Father
I know
knew.
that I exist right now.
Right.
Peter Ergo Sum applies to the divine.
You see,
Not a
for
big
us,
jump from pre-existence to awareness of pre-existence.
not at all.
is it?
Not at all. But however, there is a vital distinction, because for me to say I knew, automatically subjecting me to a limited element. Otherwise, I know. I can't. I knew. Yeah.
Well, unless you say, to say I knew,
Yes.
let me get this right. To say I knew yesterday doesn't mean I don't also know today and 2 days ago and I've always known.
But you
So
don't know what tomorrow holds.
Say again?
But you don't know what tomorrow will
I don't-
hold.
But a divine being could say, using human language, I knew a day ago, I knew 2 days ago. To point out a time period at which someone knows something does not mean they cannot always have known that.
Now, I can agree with that, but that would require definitive evidence, clear evidence. So, for example,
We have
just
to look at
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For example, as I was saying to Luke also, if I were to accept, yeah, the Creator created everything in the universe, every creature was created by the Creator, I would submit, including Jesus, created, yeah, in humanity, yeah, I then would logically assume, as he rightly pointed out, that Richard was in the divine mind, because there wasn't a time when he was not in the mind of the Creator.
We're accepting that.
Am I right? Yeah? Okay. But the demarcation line now appears because according to Richard, he says the Creator knew about the Father.
Well, I'm saying that the Creator knew about himself. The Father knew about the Father, the Son knew about the Son, the Spirit knew about the Spirit.
I'm so glad he said that. You see, without realizing it, he made three divisions. The Father knew about himself, the Son knew about himself. Were they all separate?
In personhood, yes, not in being.
Now, about 15 minutes ago, I said there are three persons. You remember that? Okay. So if
We talk about it a lot.
yeah, I know, I understand.
Yeah.
There were three persons. Now, if you are now making the admission that the person was in the mind, the person was in the mind, the person was in the mind, how many are there?
Three in person.
There can't be one person now, can there? Because you just identified their separate minds.
Yeah, but there's three.
Well, if the no, sorry, look. If that is the case, then what you are really telling me is that there is more than one God. Okay. For us to agree that there is only one with three persons, they can't have independent minds, can they?
Why not?
Well, think about it. If they have independent minds, then they are independent entities. And if they are independent entities, then they are three creators.
I think you've got to prove that. I mean, first of all, to
Not a
have
problem.
awareness, to have mind, isn't necessarily the same as for us humans, with separate brains. That's the first point. There is an area of ineffability about how a divine, omniscient substance actually practices knowledge and memory. So I would always say there's a huge grey area there where we don't know the boundaries. So
Yeah.
there is in some way
No.
three focal points of divine knowledge.
I agree,
would
I
say.
agree, yeah.
Whether we call that minds, I was doing it for the sake of convenience.
Yeah, I understand,
Use it
I
in a
understand, yeah.
mathematical sense is difficult.
Yeah.
But even if we do say that, I would still say that one being can have
Now,
three minds.
I agree.
So I don't think there's a logical
Now,
contradiction.
I feel like all we're proving is that the doctrine of the Trinity is complicated.
Well, agreed. Agreed.
would have never
Agreed.
disputed
However,
at the beginning,
no, I agree with you.
yeah.
But having said that, here is what I would submit to you. Look, thousands of scholars have wrestled with this, yeah, and this was entirely based not on the original scriptures and how they were understood, but a later understanding of what they thought the Bible said. Now, I would ask this to myself, yeah.
Are you going to break that down for us? Because that's quite a contentious sentence.
Yeah,
Could you break that down for us a bit more?
I might need to summarise today as well. I've got to get on.
I understand, Luke.
So, many scholars would say that the Trinity is a belief that flows naturally from the Scriptures.
True, agreed.
Okay.
No, I'm not doubting what they are viewing. What I'm saying is, when did that development start?
What many people say, the development starts.
Yeah,
with the
when
Scriptures.
the conversation came to the fore about the Trinity.
Well, I think some would maybe say from the very beginning, but in terms of controversy,
Yes.
not a discussion on it.
Yes.
A controversy about the nature of the Trinity. Well, I mean, even at the end of the first century, with the Gnostics,
Yes.
First John.
Yes.
I don't know. I think many scholars would maybe say from the very beginning, but I
Right. Shall we say 100 years?
Well, I might say even less than that.
Okay, let's say 50 years. 30 years.
Okay.
30 years. First gospel being written. AD around 30, 35?
Sorry?
The first gospel when it was written, around 35? Yeah?
Sure,
Let's go with that. Okay? The question is this. Vehement disagreements took place. And those disagreements took place on the very same collection of books.
That's very debatable.
Yeah.
Often many of the alternate, so for example, Marcion
Yes.
rejected many of the books.
Yes.
So for example, Marcion, radically different concept of God,
Yes.
rejected the Old Testament God,
Yeah.
and linked to that,
Yes.
rejected the Old Testament scripture.
Absolutely.
Or at least interpreted them
Yes.
very differently.
Now-
That was a bad creator. So
Yeah.
there's a strong correlation, I think, between accepting different books
Yeah.
and having very different understandings of God.
Agreed. Now, you see, if you take it and the evolution itself of the formulation, yeah, I would say this to you. Look, we have got something that seems to be complicated to the extent that we have concluded that it is a mystery. Yeah?
This gentleman, I think, acknowledged that much quicker than I did. Let's
Yes,
call it a
no
mystery
problem.
for the sake of
Let's call it a mystery for the. Now, my logic is telling me, right, if I am looking at a book and it has come and told me something which goes to the description of what the creator is and what the creator ought not to be, then a logical step for me would be this, yeah? And I'm introducing Islam into here, yeah? My logic would tell me this, wait a minute, if I look at the Bible, does it say what God is and what God is not?
To some extent, yeah. Not everything about it.
I would say
everything.
that's very
But there are
accurate.
demarcations.
I would say the Quran, from what I've read of it, which admittedly is not
I
very much,
understand.
it seems to define itself in terms of what it isn't,
Yeah.
rather than what it is. Being as a later book, which came out.
Yeah.
It comes out and it says, it seems to be almost written, as if to say that Christianity isn't true.
Yeah.
It's got a bent towards that. At least the scriptures are.
No, I understand. Yeah,
The conversation between
Yeah.
Mary and Jesus. And,
Yeah.
that kind of.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. Those are incidental. However, going to the thrust of what we are discussing here, where we are told, the complication here about the triunity, how is it composed? Who came first? Was there first? Are there three different persons? Are they separate? Everybody will acknowledge that this is a highly complicated subject
I
matter.
would say the core matter of many of what you've just said, I don't think is that complicated. There's a point at which if we keep pressing, it does become difficult.
Yes.
But God doesn't require that for salvation. In fact, the Bible doesn't expect us that we know
Yeah.
God in every single aspect. It never
Absolutely.
makes sense.
Now-
So I don't think we take that's an issue.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
it
As I
wouldn't
said
be.
earlier,
It wouldn't be.
As
However,
Jesus Christ
sorry.
is the image of the invisible God. We can't, He reveals to us as much of what we need to know God is like.
Yeah.
That's any man. As we read earlier,
Yeah.
anyone who's seen me has seen the
Yeah.
Father, and that's kind
Yeah,
of.
no, I have no problem with that. However, if you take this further, Luke, and this is what I was just trying to point out,
Sorry, yeah.
if as a human being, I want to worship a creator, my logic is telling me that how to understand the creator, to the extent that human beings can understand the creator, can only be information that the creator would provide.
Yeah.
It's certainly the best way to know the Creator, yes.
It would, Now, I'm saying this, the verse, the chapter in the Quran, 112 we are familiar with, says very clearly, say, Allah, the Creator is one, eternal, absolute, begets not nor is begotten, none like unto the Creator. Is there anything you can disagree with? Oh, sorry.
Let's get the Quran out, shall we?
Oh, excellent.
Only in as much as the whole thing about Allah, because people say, it's just the Arabic word for God, which it is,
Yeah.
obviously, but it's not the same.
Chapter
God we're talking
112.
about, and because the writer, when he writes something about Allah being, being those things, he has in mind a different God initially, to what we worship as Christians. But and therefore, if we say that God is, if we
I see. Yeah, honestly, I'll tell you something. It's an odd one, this. At the start I said, I can't visualize anything other than one creator. And logic is telling me, by definition, you can't have two creators. Do you know why you can't have two creators? Why can't you have two creators?
Well, one argument that's often used, I'm trying to remember if it's Quranic, is that therefore there would be chaos in the world and they'd be fighting with each other. I don't know if that's the point you're about to make.
No. What I was going to say, apart from that, what does the definition of the word creator mean?
the one who created the world
everything.
around us.
Now, unless you are going to tell me there is something beyond which we are not aware of, and a sort of universe.
Could theoretically say that there's a creator
Yeah.
of the, and actually the Gnostics probably go down this line. There's a creator of the material world all around us,
Yeah.
and then there's a spiritual creator of that creator, the demiurge, as it were.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
But at least of the material world.
Yeah. Now you see, I agree with you. For us to understand that, yeah, we would need the appropriate and correct information from the Creator. We can't formulate this ourselves. Yeah. So I am saying where the chapter 112 is saying, say Allah is one. Forget about the name. Say the Creator is one. Eternal, absolute, begets not, nor is begotten, none like unto the Creator. What can we disagree with?
Depends what's meant by begotten, doesn't it? It's a difficult word.
Let's go for it.
Christ is the eternally begotten Son of God, in the sense that he doesn't, you know, in the sense that there can't be another begotten son. You know, Jesus' brother Ralph or whatever. You
Yeah.
know, there can only be one begotten son. In that sense, Christ is eternally begotten. It depends what you mean by.
So
Yeah.
this is something actually that I need to think more about, and it gets raised here at Speaker's Corner. Luke, what is your perspective on the Son being begotten?
Yeah.
Where do we find that? In
I was about to ask the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
question.
Where do we find that?
Where do we find that?
John 3:16 springs to mind as the first one.
So I think most modern translations, so I think translators are generally saying monogenes is the word
Yes.
there, comes from, and I'm trying to remember, there's kind of genato with one N or two N, and one is bear and the other is kind, yeah, genos with one N
Yes.
is kind. So what it means is unique, not begotten.
Absolutely. Agreed.
So that's something.
Monogenes para patras. Yeah? Well, if that is the case, then when it says,
Enoch, Bill. Is where you're going now, yeah.
no, I wasn't going to go. No, but here's the problem though. When it says, begets not nor is begotten, none like unto the Creator. Do we find any problem with what it says?
Possibly not. I'd have to look at where else.
Absolutely, no problem at all. No problem.
Psalm 2 says, you know, you are my son today, I've forgotten thee.
Yes.
But Christians, I think, typically understand that not as literal, but as
Yeah.
referring to the recognition of Christ, or the messianic enthronement. of
Yeah,
Christ.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm open to the idea that
Yes.
we too can say God is not begotten.
Absolutely. But now, what I am saying is, look, not only that, if you look at what it says, and it's an interesting one, by definition, as human beings, we have to rely on the information or guidance provided by the Creator. Yeah? So, when the Quran says, and this is in chapter 4, verse 171, it says, وَلَا تَقُولُوا ثَلَاثَةً. Do not say three. إِنْتَهُ. Desist. خَيْرًا لَكُمْ. It will be better for you. Now, I often ask, why does it say it will be better for me?
I mean, my view is obviously that the Quran was written after the Bible, which obviously
Yeah,
makes sense anyway. But,
which was revealed,
and that
yeah.
because it's written to counteract the Christian teaching somewhat, that it contains
Well,
information which would be
actually-
specifically anti-Christian. Like,
Yeah, Luke, respectfully, I don't know who has told you this. I was about to say, I don't know who has told you that it was specifically written to counter the Christian narrative. No, someone's been misinforming
Not
you.
all of the book,
No,
perhaps,
I'm
but
saying it has,
this
it has
verse
an,
is for the people.
it has an agenda.
Yeah,
it has an
no, no.
agenda, is what I'm saying. It has an agenda.
No.
A bit of an agenda.
I think again somebody has misinformed you respectfully. You see, I will say one thing. Yeah, for us to even suggest that it has an agenda, I would submit anyway, it would dismiss the very idea of Jesus Christ in totality. But it doesn't do that. And in fact, as I've always said to my Christian friends, you know, it's odd. We have got a chapter after the mother of Jesus Christ. Do you have that in the Bible?
A chapter about Mary. is it?
Yeah.
Well, there's the
No.
Magnificat.
Well, there was another one, but it was described as apocryphal. Yeah. But the question is this: Jesus Christ in the Quran is talked of in the highest terms possible, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. Yeah. The only disagreement that you can have with me in terms of Christ is chapter 4, verse 157, where it says Christ was not killed nor was he crucified. Yeah.
It's bad news.
Well, that verse and verses where he denies his divinity.
I'm
Well,
going to get off. I've got to make my way to St. Helens.
St. Helens in Liverpool.
No, St Helens, Bishopgate. I don't know
Oh,
where.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know London.
Helens Bishopsgate.
yeah,
I'm
so-
trying to think the best.
Well-
because it's right next to the
Gherkin,
Gherkin.
isn't it? Yeah.
All right, okay, my brother.
But
A
nice
pleasure
to chat
meeting
to
you.
you.
I do. Please do forgive me if I've said anything untoward.
No, it's all right,
Not
but
intended. It's in the
it's
spirit
an
of
enjoyable
discussion.
conversation.
Excellent. Well,
Nice to meet you
you have a
as well.
safe
Are
journey.
you alright getting there? You've got a phone, you can Google how to get there.
Yeah,
I'll
do you
bring
know,
my
are you
wife,
okay?
I'll get my Google on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't help you. I'm not from here. He knows.
Is it
I
Richard?
think it's
Which church
I
are you
think it's
from?
quite near London Liverpool Street, but I could be mistaken. I go to Enfield Evangelical Free Church. Very good church, very nice thing for a church.
Yeah, did you know
I like that.
Sunday mornings, 10
Yeah,
o'clock.
Enfield is down in Enfield?
Get your advert in, eh?
I'm sure I knew a girl from there once. So I'm married now.
Oh, why? You're on video. Be careful. Look after yourself.
I don't actually know that many people
I
now.
thought I'd done was the pastor now. What's the pastor called?
No, Johnny Prime.
Look after yourself, Paul. Yeah. Yeah. Take it. Look at these dodgy guys. They're all eating by themselves. Have you seen them?
I know. Package
Yeah. No. As I was saying, yeah.
They're offering you some if you like.
I know. No. We'll have some. Yeah. We'll form you. Yeah. Of course, we'll offer him some.
I'm good.
If he doesn't eat, fine. He's a non-vegetarian. Are you a non-vegetarian?
I'm a pescatarian.
What?
Fish, a vegetarian who eats fish.
A vegetarian who eats fish. I knew it. That's why he doesn't want the meat.
A pentapescatarian.
What about
Yeah.
Pentecostal am I?
No. The person who only eats fish that eat fish.
Oh, I see. Okay, very good.
Yeah, well, whatever. I'm a non-vegetarian. Yeah, but as I was just telling him, at the end of the day, I always say this, and it's not only to my Christian friends. I would say it across the board, that if you are going to look at things, look at the evidence first, assess it critically. Yeah, look at other views. Yeah, and try and formulate something reasonable. Yeah, and one thing I've always known with my Christian friends is that there is more a belief orientation rather than actually looking at the evidence and what the evidence says. And I'm not suggesting it's only the Christian. I think it's right across the board. And my exercise in most instances is to make us think that, look, it shouldn't be just that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, that would probably be true. That would be true of most Christians. It's
Yes.
something that they're bought into.
Yes.
It's something
It's
that
likewise
they
with
believe
everybody
without
else,
much
yeah.
evidence. Sure. I would say that's not been my experience, and particularly the circles I've moved in.
Yes.
I think, obviously a lot of apologetic circles,
Yeah, of
kind
course.
Reformed
Yeah.
evangelicals, very known for being head knowledge.
Yes.
Studying at university, very thinking, rational Christians.
Yeah.
So that's not been my kind of personal, overwhelming experience, but generally speaking, yes, that would be true.
Yeah, no, but that's what we want. Yeah, but the last time we had left, you had given me a book.
Was it Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus?
Yes.
I was wondering where they've all gone.
No, you gave it to me. I've been reading it, and I said, right, you know what? One day we are going to sit down,
Okay.
and we are going to discuss that book itself. I will. Hopefully, we are back again. Not next week, the week after. I hope
might
to
not
see
be
you
here
here.
the week after.
Oh, is it? Well,
traveling.
that's
Well,
fine.
we'll bump into each other again.
I'm absolutely certain. Next time I come, I will bring the book because I've seen what we need, and there is something which we can actually discuss.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
It's a pleasure meeting you
Absolute
again,
pleasure.
Richard. Are you sure you won't eat something?
No,
It's
no,
rice.
I'm good.
Huh? Excellent. Well, I'm sure we'll bump into each other again and
Absolutely.
continue our.
Good to see you. Thanks for watching.
Likewise.